Hey everybody, it's Lair and Torrent, your licensed clinical therapist, and I'm here with my lovely partner. God, you're an absolute visionary. Look at you. You're just glowing. Holy shit. I was stunned right there at the opening, right? Wow. Costa Rica is good on you, you know? This is the Practice of Love podcast. We are back. We have been relocated to our new home, our new location in Playa Grande, Costa Rica. And today we're going to talk about, well, I'm not even sure really what we're going to talk about. We're going to see where it goes, kind of as we're seeing where our life goes. Essentially, we're talking about change. We're talking about shift. It's been up for me in the conversations that I've been having with clients and this last talk I did with the company. And so I thought it would be kind of an interesting conversation for us to talk about shift, to talk about change. So much is changing in everybody's lives every day, all the time. It is a fundamental aspect of life, and yet it is literally one of the things people like least. And so we can start there and we can sort of see where the conversation goes. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm a little tired, which I will just name. I think it's good to name it. And I think change is a good topic because not only just does it happen as a part of life, but there's so much change happening right now, especially in the States. And I think it's important to name. And I know that one of the biggest issues I've had recently was recognizing how much I was resisting change. Choosing to move to Costa Rica, that change I could accept, but the kind of changes that are happening, I found resistance was like causing a lot of disruption.
And so when you recognize like change is coming, and let's also put on our map that we're speaking with a woman who has moved to several countries and large cities sight unseen.
This is the third place I've moved sight unseen.
Yeah, never having been here. I mean, you'd been to Costa Rica.
Yes.
But you'd never been to Playa Grande. I had never been to Playa Grande, but I'd heard good things. I don't think I've ever moved anywhere. Maybe LA. I moved to LA sort of sight unseen, but I lived in New York, and I know it's different, but those are just two absolute metropolises, and sort of you kind of, the situations are perhaps somewhat different, but by and large, you're kind of doing the same things.
Yeah, but this is the third location in a row. I moved to New York having never been there. Huge mistake. So glad I stayed and met you. But good Lord.
Hold on a second. You met me there. So how much of a mistake could that have
been? That's what I said.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that I went. I spilled pen all over my hand. And then we moved to Charleston, never been there. And then here we are. So that seems to be how I roll.
Well, in fairness, Charleston was your answer to anywhere other than New York. I'm done. I can't do it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Other than Washington, D.C., which was one of my first suggestions that we still laugh about.
Oh my God. No. So I would say for me, those kind of changes, I'm pretty adaptable. Like location wise, I'm pretty adaptable. I'll figure it out. But other kinds of change, going back to resistance, when I see people suffering, or just suffering created or feeling out of control, that kind of change, it's really hard.
Well, and I think if we're talking about shift, if we're talking about change in our lives, very quickly on the heels of that conversation, we are going to be talking about those very Eastern concepts of acceptance and resistance. And so I guess the question I have for you is knowing the shift and change is coming, seeing it on the horizon, how do you deal with it? How do you deal with shift both big and small?
Well, and I think that's what I notice is it's not the same depending on what it is. Like the kind of change of okay, we're moving to Costa Rica. We've been dreaming about this for a while. This is a big change. I don't resist that at all. I'm like, okay, let's do it. When it feels like there's change happening, that feels out of my control, there's a lot of resistance. I have a hard time accepting that. And so what we're noticing is like, if I'm choosing the change, then I can roll with it pretty easily. But if it's happening to me or outside of me, then I want to fight it.
Mm-hmm. And so how do you do that? How do you fight it?
Well, I mean, I can only speak with, what's happening in the States is I was like, I'm not going there, I'm not going to indulge in it. I'm not going to focus on it. It doesn't mean I have my head in the sand, but I found myself like, I'm just not even going to go there. And I thought I was being mindful, but what I realized is I was refusing to accept what is, and that was creating more fear inside me. And when I noticed that resistance was creating the fear, I took a moment last week and I just was like, this is this moment. And when I breathed into this moment, when I accepted it, it became easier. It became easier. Like it was like my energy shifted. It was like, okay, rather than just being in opposition and not willing to look at this thing, the acceptance said, okay, now that I'm accepting it, what do I want to do? How do I want to be in relationship to this? And just because we're out of the country doesn't mean we're not in relationship to it.
So
What
I've known you a little while. So what I've seen and what I marvel at often is when this comes up for you, I think, and again, we do our morning check-ins every day. And if you're not doing your morning check-ins with your partner on a daily basis, then you're missing out. So that's part of the practice of love for sure. More communication is better. And I think, our relationship thrives on that. And so in our morning conversations over the years, I've become very privileged to your process. And so I actually think I have a better answer for your process than you do. And that is like, you're very quick to go to the spiritual.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. Yeah. Next, like once I've accepted, okay, you tell me.
I'm not done talking about you. So let me finish. No. So, and I'm often like, son of a bitch, she did it. She goes there, and it's not like this airy fairy, like, oh yeah, the excavation of the shadow piece is upon us. That's not it. It's like you're very practical in the things that you do on the daily basis. You focus on the things that you can change, which is important, and things that you do have dominion over, and relationships that you can be effective in. But you also are very effective in like putting things that are often in the macro and out of your control in a spiritually understood place, a place where it feels like your soul can rest and kind of go, oh, it's not just about this thing that's happening in this moment that everyone's sort of like running around, chicken littling, skies falling. You will go to that place of, oh, okay, this is the collective lesson. This is the lesson I think I'm getting from it. And so this feels like the ground on which you stand. And it's pretty awesome to watch, to be honest.
I didn't know you'd notice. I'm just kidding. No,
I'm always marveling. Yeah.
I'm joking. And I really appreciate you reflecting that, because that is what I have done so much work on myself, and to come to a place that this is my practice. My life is my practice, that I resist, I accept. And then I come to a place of understanding, which is what's happening on the micro level, or I'm going to get it wrong. My brain's not online yet from the move. But all this that's happening is just like a disturbance in the force for a purpose. Like how things are going can't continue. And I understand that. I understand that suffering is a call to personal transformation. It's a call to change. Like it's a call to say like, hey, this isn't working. And I think we've been sitting back as a collective in our country of just like trading our personal power for material wealth. And it's disturbing. So I see as like a call back to self, like all of this stuff. Every time I feel like it pulls me outside myself and I'm like, I have to go, no, come home. come home, what do I know to be true? And I have to come back to a place of love. And I also, I said this morning and we've been talking about this. I refuse to allow myself to be terrorized mentally on a daily basis by this bullshit. Then I can't be of service. Then I can't hold space for the people that I need to hold space for. Then I can't, my clients, my family, myself. So when I come back to my soul, it cradles my heart. It gives my weary human a respite. And I have to do that, as often as possible. Why are you laughing?
Because often, it's back in Charleston when we'd be walking through the woods and I would get you on some rant, about this and get you talking about it. I'm like, we should be running a fucking camera on this, It's like, these are the things that you need to be saying into the camera for Instagram, right? And you're like, nah, I don't care. I don't really give a shit, whatever. And I'm like, this stuff is gold. If you're not going to say it, I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it was mine. Right. But I wanted to bring this up and I sort of wanted to excise this from you and for people to see that, like, this is how you think, right? This is, like you said, my life is my practice. Mm-hmm. Holy shit. Let's put that on a few t-shirts, sell some merch. But like, these things come forth from you primarily because you don't get caught up in the energy of the tumult, right? Not that there aren't things that we need to do, right? We need to fill sandbags before the storm. We need to, have enough food in the refrigerator and a little money in the bank, all those things. But you don't, by and large, it seems, let yourself get caught up in the rudimentary tumult of the situation. And you seem to allow yourself to transcend what's happening, the fear that's happening in the moment, so that you can actually practice this thing. You said something earlier today that was spot on about how, I'm going to butcher it, but you said, people learn and know all of these things, but how often are they actually putting them into practice?
Right.
And
Millie and I were talking about that. Like, she was saying, like, they know the concepts and the ideas, but when it comes down to it, when shit is hitting the fan, how many people actually know how to implement these tools that they've been talking about or reading about? And I think that's one of the things is my life is a practice. It is a practice to implement these tools every single day. And that's how I regulate myself.
Yeah, I think that's part of that's been, like, if I'm honest, like, the piece that's been plaguing me most is that I can get caught up in the mundane, right? Mm-hmm. In the pieces and the parts and the whole shit. Look at that and what's happening here. Let's keep an eye on that. And look, there's something needs to be said for that, right? Like, there is some import to those things. But I do find that I sort of marvel at your ability to stay in that soul place. And I have to really fight. Like, yesterday was a really tough day for me. And it was hard for me to fight my way back to that place of, like, a soul connection and a soul understanding, because so much of what happens in the world happens on social media, happens in the news, just pulls you away from that soul place. And I think that's my work going forward. That's that practice of loving myself, is to go, oh, okay, yeah, no, it's not just a cognitive exercise and understanding. I can read that meme and get it. I can read that book and understand what they're saying. It's like, how does it jump off the page and into my life? And I've said that 1,000 times.
Yeah. And that's, I think, because you've been working so much over the past years. I mean, your work has been like a form of meditation for you, but I guess I observe you're finding that you need more, you're wanting more. And I've been working as well and doing other things. But becoming a medium has asked me to have the spiritual relationship. Like, it requires it of me. If I'm going to be good at what I do and to be able to teach. And I just totally forgot what I was going to say. Oh, but I want to be clear. Someone could listen and say, oh, I'm being selfish because I'm turning to myself. But I want to be clear that, like, the only way I can actually be in love and be loving is if I notice my dysregulation, I tend to the feelings that it creates in my body. So this is the practice. I notice my dysregulation. I notice my fear. I notice my resistance. I
Okay.
tend to my heart. I tend to the human aspects of me first. I start where I am. Like just a minute ago, I was feeling so much grief for friends whose parents have to walk around afraid they're going to be deported. I have so much grief for people who feel so scared right now. So I took a moment and I grieved and I let that move through me. And then I come to a place of rest and I come to a place of clarity of understanding as individuals, this is a call back to self. This is a call back to our spiritual practice.
And I want to dovetail on that really quick before I forget this, that like something that happens to me that I think probably happens to most Americans, and it's the juxtaposition of our American culture to this Costa Rican culture that we're currently in seeing, right? That we get so caught up, and I think I get caught up in the mundane, in the work, right? Like you're saying, I love my work, and I love showing up for my clients, and it's my passion, and all those things. But I feel this deep sense of calling from my soul for quiet, peace, and it's like there is this thirst that I have inside of me that like, and I'm not, and I need to tend to that more. And I think that we don't tend to that. That pull towards going into silence, going into the quiet, and finding out what the messaging is. Like, what are we getting? What do we need to know? What's the directional that we're finding from that heart-centered soul place? You're really good at doing that. Like, you're really good at saying, like, essentially, this is what I get from it. It's like, I am of no help to the world if I have not helped myself first.
Right. Because all that staying caught up in the mundane keeps us frantic, and we're panicking and we're frantic, and we're not from that place. We're not really doing anything but staying in a cycle of fear and staying in a cycle of over consuming information, which may or may not be true. Right. We're letting this outside reality determine our inner reality. And this is all a callback to self. If there was ever a time to develop a spiritual practice, it is screaming loud. It is screaming loud. So I think because we're taught to climb the ladder and to feed that egoic part of us and to gain that material wealth. I mean, it's like I was thinking about it. Money is safety. Money is safety. So accumulate more money. And this is not the way I think, which we've joked at times.
Obviously not the way you think.
What did you say?
Not the way you think. It's not the way you think.
It's not.
I need you to think more that way.
No. But that keeps us in this state of like this state of frantic. What am I trying to say? Like frantic state. Keeps us in this frenetic state. It keeps us outside our body, up in our heads, and we're just like,
really
and yeah. And it's a call to that stillness, because it's only in the stillness do we know how to proceed. It's only then are we going to actually hear, this is what's next, right? This is what you...
Yeah, but dovetailing on our topic of shift, of change, that requires a seismic, tectonic shift for most people, right? To go from that way of thinking. And what you're describing is like, there is this differential between you and I. Now, growing up as poor as I grew up, like, I still have that stray dog mentality. If there's food, let's fucking eat it, right? If there's money, let's make it. Because I never want to go back there because it was so bad. Now, I'm having to find that place of shift to know that we're going to be okay. And how often do you kind of have to say that to me one way or another? It's like, I need you, you need you to take a break. And I'm like, absolutely. I get on my schedule and I find ways to fill it.
Right. Well, do you think filling... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, that shift, that change to that it's really hard for me to allow for it. My nervous system is fighting it left and right.
Yeah. Well, it requires an incredible amount of trust. And I think there's the trauma of being poor. And I also wonder how much like you get dopamine from being busy, and how the stillness is incredibly uncomfortable. The quiet is incredibly uncomfortable. I wonder if it's both.
Well, I think it is both. I think you're exactly right. Like it's also the known. It's just not just the dopamine. It's like you go into the known. Like, I know what this is. This feels good. I can help dive into other people's problems. And there's good. There goes Jake again. He's pacing a lot today.
Yeah.
And but sitting in the stillness, going into the quiet, that require. I mean, that stillness, that quiet's very, very loud and can be very uncomfortable. Yeah.
And I remember the process of walking through the discomfort of silence. I remember that. It wasn't easy. It wasn't hard. But then I began to love it and crave it. It became a priority, you know? So it is a seismic shift for us too, because the world is so loud and like social media is so addictive, right? It's so easy to just go on and like get your attention taken away and like, oh, I'll just watch this and I'll just watch that. And next thing you know, like I've said, I'm just 5 minutes on there, my brains are scrambled. But it's really hard for us to be in that quiet and to sit with ourselves. And that is one of the most important things you can learn to do.
Yep. Right. And that requires a shift. That requires a change, a tectonic one, where
A mindful one.
A mindful one where you notice the reach for the phone. You notice the reach to occupy your brain, as opposed to stepping back, taking a breath, picking up a book, or maybe just being in the moment. I know that you got a lot of practice at that going out to the horses.
Yeah.
Where you would just spend an hour or two out there in the middle of nowhere in the woods with these horses. That had been an incredible way to practice being in the moment and being in the stillness.
Well, and that's why I made it a priority. I mean, it was like 2 years of like, I'm going out there and those horses require presence. You can't be in your head with horses. They will not connect. They will not respond. They'll go off and do their own thing. They will let you know quickly when you're not there. And so, yeah, it really taught me. And I guess for you, since you're working on this, what do you feel would help you go into that stillness you're craving?
So I would say more time dedicated, but I know that right now, I would feel like, okay, well, I probably should be working on social media, or I should probably be writing the new book proposal. I should probably be spending time with my kids.
Okay, let's pause.
Yeah.
Yes. And what is more important than connection to your soul? Because none of that will really get done in the more beautiful way. None of that will come out as the expression you want unless you've taken time to connect to your soul. So it's like, what comes first? What do you think?
Well, I know what actually comes first, but not what should come. And I have to say that, like, in the moment, the thing I struggle with is feeling like this is actually doing something.
What do you mean?
Well, there's this doer in me that feels like, no, actually writing something or making a post or writing the book proposal that you've been promising your agent for the last 3 months, that would be actually moving the needle. And that sitting here in silence and just sort of staring at a wall or closing my eyes and meditating, that's not really getting, like, it doesn't, there's nothing for my doer to sink their teeth into on that.
So if you had a client that said that to you, what would you tell them? What would?
Yeah, right. And so, well, I would say that you probably need to sit in it for a while and be with the discomfort. And what I said earlier is we come to resistance and we come to acceptance, right? Practicing of acceptance. So in those moments, what I'm experiencing is resistance. And one of the things I've been practicing with lately is every morning when I wake up, and some mornings are better than others, it's a grand opportunity and a grand experiment in acceptance. And so my question to myself is, every morning when I wake up, I say, what am I resisting? Because the moment my eyes open, I'm even before that, there's some version of resistance going on. It
Mm-hmm.
might be just getting out of bed. I'm too tired. I don't want to get out of bed, or it might be the day, or it might be any number of things. But I noticed that resistance, once consciousness is sort of landed, resistance is not far behind. And I'm going to bet that's true for
Right.
everybody who's listening. If you think about it,
Mm-hmm.
you are going to meet resistance moment to moment. And so
Mm-hmm.
what happens when we don't resist? And there's a book that I love out there, and I think you've read it too, Michael Singer's book. He's famous for um, his book, The Untethered Soul, but he wrote another book that spanned across 40 years of his life, called The Surrender Experiment. And if you remember, that book was just about him surrendering to each moment, like noticing his resistance to particular things. It started out with a divorce that he did not want. It started out with him not having a house, but living in his van in the, Florida wilderness and doing yoga and feeling all this resistance to his life. But then going on this thing he called the surrender experiment, where he said yes to all of the things that sort of came into his life one by one. It's really interesting. I thought it was a really interesting book. And so I sort of keep that concept in mind, like, where is my resistance and what happens when I learn to just accept this? Now, the thing I would say to people, and the thing that's important to understand when you're working with these notions is, I'm not saying that this thing that I can't stand, this thing that I hate, this thing that I think must change stays, and I just accept it and go, well, this is life. No, what I'm accepting is this is the moment right now.
Right.
I'm accepting that I'm resistant to my day. Doesn't mean it's not going to change. Doesn't mean that it can't change. But very often, just shining the light of conscious understanding and mindfulness on that resistance, it begins to dissipate. And so,
Yeah.
that's one of the pieces that I would offer to my client. I do, and often the client is myself.
Well, and I think you're right. The only thing anything can change is when we accept it. And I remember I started the practice of being in silence maybe like 10 or 11 years ago. And I remember sometimes I would just lay on the bed and stare at the walls. Like, this was in the midst of being a mother, and the babysitter would come pick up a kid. I am a mother, but in the midst of parenting littles, and the babysitter would come and pick up the kids. And I recognized I didn't know what to do with myself. And sometimes I would just say, just sit here for a minute. And I would lay on the bed and just stare at the wall for like 10 minutes. And I remember being so conditioned to keep going. We had just moved from New York City. It was like move, 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 go, 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 go. And so when I'm thinking of that, what I'm thinking for you is, I wonder what it would be like, is even if it's 5 minutes of silence, like for anyone listening, 5 minutes of silence, like we're not asking you to sit. I don't do 45 minutes of sitting meditation. I have a very active meditative practice. Like, I like to go for walks in the woods. I like to journal. I like to swim, like do other things. But even if you just take 5 minutes or 2 minutes of, I'm not going to pick up the phone and go on social media, or I am just going to stare at the wall for 2 minutes. I'm going to sit with that discomfort for 2 minutes, and then I'm going to go write a post for social media. But prioritizing those 2, 5, 10 minutes, and choosing things that are fun. Like, to me, spiritual practice doesn't have to be like this really boring seated meditation. It can be something like, I'm going to go for a walk in the woods, or I'm going to drink a cup of coffee mindfully, or whatever it is. It can be something really, it can be drawing, it can be painting, it can be anything that's not a distraction, but brings you into the present moment. So I just wonder, like, if you had those 5 minutes, if that would help, like, and then you can go do the thing.
Well, I think you bring up a really important point, and that is the thing that the first practice in the book is mindfulness. And what people first think of is, oh, you're going to ask me to meditate. And that's the last thing I'm going to ask anyone to do, primarily because very often people's nervous system, especially Americans, are like, fuck that. There's no way I'm going to be able to do that. And they've already thrown it out. And so what you're offering, and I think what's really important to recognize, is that meditation can be an active one, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can do it while you're walking, you can do it while you're exercising, you can do it while you're drinking a cup of coffee. And so you can bring yourself into presence even while you're doing something, but that thing can become that spiritual practice, right? Like you going out to the horses, that was very active. You know, you were mucking fields and feeding horses and watering them, but you were doing all of it by and large from a very mindfulness based, very meditative place.
It was my spiritual practice those days, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. More
How does it feel to talk about it? What'd you say?
I mean, I didn't know that we would get down this particular road on it, but it's honest. It's true. Like this is the hole in my game. This is the place I know that like I need to get back to. And I think that there's a part of me, there's sort of an inner critic that comes up that's again saying like, what are you doing? Come on. Time is, come on, let's go. And,
right.
I do want to find a way to scale things back a bit and have more time. And, it's like, I think about it. It's like one of the things that catalyzed the move down here was this sense of like, I know that I identify as a 30-year-old. I'm not. And I'm moving into this time of my life where it's like, okay, if not now, when? Mm-hmm. And I think time is in fact of the essence, right? Like to begin to gear the nervous system down. And I think that's what I have to do. And I think that's what so many people are charged with, is like becoming aware that your nervous system, it's like a car whose idle is up. The RPMs are revving at a particularly high rate. And so bringing that down is something that I know that I have to do. And that takes going into the silence, that takes going into a place of quiet, that takes, not always doing. And we are a culture of doers. Mm-hmm. If you're not growing, you're dying, is that sort of corporate mentality around it. And I think there's perhaps a gender piece to this that may be important to kind of highlight. And that is that.
Do you see Jasper behind you? Sorry.
No, what did he do?
He's crawling on the ground. He's such a ham.
What a little jerk. So the gendered piece is, I think by and large, men, and I always say I can speak for all men because I am one. We feel that we are loved for what we produce. Mm. And so
that kid.
Yeah, we're loved for what we can produce. And I think that's hardwired. I think that's hardwired into me. That
even when like my love for you is not based on that at all.
You like pretty things. Come on, let's face it. I mean, don't let her fool you with this hippie. What is this vibe you've got going? I can smell the patchouli from here.
Oh, stop. I do not. No. You're the one that likes the pretty things. Let's be honest.
That's the truth. I do. I like nice things. I'm not going to pretend that I don't. No, but it is. It's like there is that sort of push pull of like what's enough, and this relative world does run on the energy of money, and I think I have a hard time getting past that. Mm. And so,
do you feel like
that keeps me in the fight? It keeps me in the fray.
Mm. But I hear that you're considering changing that a bit.
Trying to. And there's parts of me that come up as I say that go, what are you doing? Don't be stupid. You've got a good thing going. Why wouldn't you continue it? And I guess I would love to create scenarios where I'm working smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it just feels like there's maybe some healing to happen around those parts that are such achievers and doers, that they recognize they can be loved and that they are enough and there will be enough. I mean, it feels like there's healing around the child in you that was incredibly poor, the training around like constantly striving for more. I just wonder what, if those had more healing, what your relationship to work and life would be.
It's a great question. And as you were talking about it, I was sort of kind of reflecting on what it felt like, when it was my mom and I, and there just wasn't enough. Like the anxiety, even though I was a young kid, I still felt her anxiety around that, and that sort of understanding that, like, what are we going to do? And I think there's a part of me that never doesn't want to get anywhere near that, and nor are we. But there's a fear-based aspect, and most people who are wired this way, yeah, but we could be, most Americans are about a paycheck away from fill in the blank. That's not us. And, it's hard to, I think, pry that fear and anxiety out of that monkey's fist. It's hardwired into those of us who are like this to say, but what about this? And what if this? And how about that? And so it becomes a real practice that I need to kind of, I think, in going back to my original point, I need to engage in this more, right? And so really, there's a in what you do so well, there's a whole lot of faith, it seems, faith that I think when I've been compartmentalized in these sort of earthbound, very practical aspects of myself, I'm loath to find that. I'm loath to find that faith, because faith almost feels like, a wish in the wind, a message in a bottle. It feels foolish. So get in the chair, get on the stage, write the book, do whatever you have to do. And it's interesting because when you fought your way out of that socioeconomic hole, it becomes sort of ingrained in you and becomes hardwired in you, to always be on the fight. This kid is unbelievable. And what could he possibly have forgotten a third or fourth time?
I think he wants to be on the podcast.
So we've talked about that before. He would never stop talking. You and I would not get a word in edgewise.
He would be great. He would be great.
Be great. So yeah, that's the daily fight, right? That's the point. That's the piece that I'm trying to change. Going back to our topic for today, shift, change, and for me, this type of shift is hard because change at every level is scary. There's fear of the unknown. There's fear of our comfort level. There's fear of so many things. Change, I think, brings up fear. And for me, changing this aspect of myself, even though now we live, as our neighbor said to us, another day in paradise, huh? And I was like, yeah. But I do feel like if I'm not careful, and you need to, if you're not watching me, I will recapitulate the life we had in New York, then I moved to Charleston, right?
Yeah.
That I'm going to go ahead and move right here.
Yep.
Yeah.
You'll just keep working all the time and not trusting. Yep.
I think I've told this story before, but you and I went through my internship, and there was this supervisor that I had there, and they all would marvel at my ability to work, right? Because I had my practice in the East Village. I was working there at their practice and, getting my clinical hours. I was going to school, and I was bartending 3 nights a week. And we had a kid and they would all marvel at my ability to just go. And then we moved to Charleston, and I ended up having to call that supervisor to get some licensing piece to get my reciprocal licensing in Charleston in South Carolina. And so I was talking with her on the phone and saying, so I've got got a small practice that I'm building here in Charleston, but I still have my New York practice. I fly up there every Tuesday, and I work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I fly home Friday, and then I spend Friday, Saturday, Sunday with the kids and with Ash, and then I work a day in my practice in Charleston, and then I fly back. And she said to me, she goes, "Oh, so you've just totally recreated the life you had in New York. Now you live in Charleston." And I was like, "Son of a bitch, that's right." And it was like the thing I did not want to do, but I sort of blindly walked into it because of this, what I only sort of surmise is a deficit perspective ultimately.
Well, and it's the part that's running your work life. And like when I talk about
session.
What?
Am I going to have to pay you for the session?
Well, we were talking about the different things. I mean, if you want.
Holy shit.
I'm pretty good at this. I think that's the thing that I've noticed is like, I don't feel like you give a lot of room for change to happen and to trust that change can happen. Like you fill the space so much that relationship to spirit, God, whatever you want to call it, that relationship to trust, to your soul doesn't get to like breathe and like expand because
I think that's right.
Because that fearful part of you is running the show. And, I know we're about to run out of time, but I did want to say real quick, when we're talking about a practice, like just in moving here, that was a practice in trust, like every step of the way. And then I remember just getting on the planes and the planes being canceled and delayed and like just all the things that went wrong over like a 24-hour period. And I thought it was really interesting. What?
It really wasn't that big a deal, but it felt like it at the time. Yeah.
Well, it was annoying. And we were also timing it out with meeting the dogs, and just there were a lot of factors in our baggage. And, we spent so much time making sure we had everything meticulously packed and taking so little and all the things. So it just felt like we were talking about this earlier. It was the mental game. Like moving here wasn't hard. It was the mental game. It was how we thought about it, how we held it mentally when we let the fear take over. Were we in trust? And I think in order to create any sort of change, like you're talking about with work, there's an element of trust and surrender, of letting go, of allowing spirit to meet you, of allowing this life to meet you in a different place. And there's so much control you're holding on to. And that's hard. It's hard to change that, but it is possible.
It is possible. Well, I thank you for my session. I feel great.
I got you. Well, I will say, how did this morning feel for you? We had a really beautiful long morning. We went swimming with the kids. We had a beautiful breakfast.
It felt amazing. But it's like I've orchestrated Fridays. And so, my nervous system could allow for that, knowing that I've got a few sessions today. So baby steps for sure.
Baby steps.
Change is a coming.
It is a coming.
So I just want to, in closing, say thanks to everybody who listened and joined. If you like the content and want to hear more from two practicing therapists who actually practice therapy, definitely like and subscribe and follow and do all of the things. We really appreciate all of the comments and the people chatting to us about the content. If you have any show ideas or things you'd like us to cover, please don't hesitate to reach out and let us know. But for me and my lovely bride, Ashley, this has been the Practice of Love podcast. I'm your co-host, Lair and Torrent. I hope to see you guys here again in the relative near. Anything you want to say, Ash?
No, just thanks for watching and listening. We're so grateful.
Yeah, and for those of you who want to find more of us, you can check us out on Instagram and on YouTube now.
Yeah, YouTube. Okay, right. Talk soon.